Bienvenidos and welcome to the High Ground, where we watch and talk movies and TV. I'm Tina and I'm joined today by my partner in crime, Henry. Today's video is super exciting because we're taking a look at both Barbie and Oppenheimer in celebration of Barbenheimer weekend and this summer's most anticipated movies. We hope to have timestamps for you below so you can skip to the movie review you want to hear.
And while you're down there, if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel, hit the thumbs up, and share with your buds. It really does make our day knowing that you're enjoying the content. And let us know in the comments below if you've seen either of the movies, and if so, what you thought about them. But for now, let's get into it with Barbie.
Barbie was a super fun movie.
It really was.
Directed by Greta Gerwig, who I think is probably the perfect choice for this type of film. Barbie centers around Barbie suffering a crisis that leads her to question her existence and her own world and pushes her to the journey that we see on Barbie.
Yeah. Actors were perfectly cast. You have stereotypical Barbie played by Margot Robbie, as well as Ken being played by Ryan Gosling. But as we find out in this Barbie land, there's multiple Barbies and multiple Kens, so there's a wide cast of different actors portraying either a Barbie or a Ken, and it's just portrayed so well.
It's so funny, like the opening scene when Barbie is waking up and starting her routine, and we see what her day-to-day is, and it's just, hi Barbie, hi Barbie, hi Barbie. It's just hilarious because they all are named Barbie. So I really like that the Barbie world was realistic in a sense that it's toys. It's based off of toys. It looks like toys. Their animation, like for effects, is like toys.
Yeah.
And like even the props and the staging that they're interacting with is all toys. So I love that it was sticking to that fact, right? Like this movie is based off of toys, and that's what we're gonna show you.
Yeah.
But it does dive deep too, and has some underlying messages, especially like second half of the movie when you have the real humans coming out and Barbie travels to the real world, quote unquote. And at that point, I think it gets more emotionally mature because it's hitting some like real life points. And Barbie is experiencing emotions for the first time, and that portrayal, like Margot Robbie does a great job, I think, from how it transitions, her character at least transitions from just a toy, a Barbie who's supposed to be stereotypical, happy, and like
the perfect
always
Barbie,
look perfect, to the complete opposite, where she's going through this crisis, and we see her like melting down and like in the middle of like random places, and she's looking for help. So I really, really liked that, where we kind of get a really juxtaposition of both worlds and how different they are, and how unrealistic the expectations, or at least the belief of what the real world was. And sometimes like that goes to show like how kids see it, because again, this Barbies are for kids, right? But I think the movie says a little more to that. It's not just for kids, but kids have an unrealistic idea of what the real world is. And Barbie shows us that sometimes the reality of it is really hard to grasp, and she did a great job in transitioning, right? And like accepting the reality of it, but also still wanting to go and have Barbie be Barbie, you know?
Yeah. And I think with this message that's being relayed and it's so forefront, it's also like surrounded by really great performances, really great direction. The visuals were very poppy, and when you were in Barbie Land, it was like you were saying, you were in a dream house in a toy world, and the physics there didn't really make sense compared to the real world. And I like how you were putting it there. So I think, like you were saying, Greta Gerwig was the perfect director to make this type of movie.
Absolutely.
And I think Margot Robbie was a great decision for Barbie, because she, of course, can play that stereotypical perfect Barbie, but she can also relay those emotions, and you can see it in her face and in the way that she was kind of portraying this Barbie going through the real world.
But let's definitely acknowledge that the show was stolen by Ryan Gosling.
Yes.
He like outperformed, or at least he just outshined everyone, in my opinion, when he had his own scenes, when he did his own dance performances, his choreographed scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Those were so great, so funny that I can't help but like think of him too, which is cool because Barbie has always been Ken, and they even say that towards the end, Barbie and Ken, but it's like a Barbie and a Ken, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So Ken really outshines, I think, a lot of characters because he's trying to be his own person too.
Yeah.
And Ryan Gosling does it so well. Like, it's so good.
Mm-hmm.
I would want to watch it just for his dance scenes.
He really has some comedic chops that
He's
not
so
a lot
funny.
of people correlate with Ryan Gosling, because you know him as the heartthrob from The Notebook,
Yeah.
or, you know, like you were saying, that stoic character from Drive, you know, so it's not really, when you think comedy, you think Ryan Gosling, but
Yeah.
we were having a conversation a little bit after the movie, or before we watched the movie, about how I'm looking forward to it because it has that same type of vibe that he played in The Nice Guys, where he just really has some comedic timing, and it's so...
And he's just having fun with
Yeah, it's so subtle, and it's just so good because he's just, like you're saying, having a great time with it. And even through the press conferences, it looked like him and Margot Robbie were having a amazing time.
A good old time.
Yeah, with Barbie in general. So
it does feel like everyone who was involved with the project just had a great time. Even the music, like, sure, you know, some people might say a little bad comments about the music because it was building on songs that already exist. Yeah. Songs that are older, and like the Barbie song, right? But still, the point is like bringing a new spin to it, bringing it to relevancy to the movie.
Yeah.
And just, I think you got a summer hit in this movie. Well, that people are gonna be playing for the rest of the summer in their cars.
Literally, we're playing it right after the movie.
It's so fun. This movie was so unexpected. Like, I honestly, when Barbie was announced, I did not know what to expect. Yeah. And I don't think either of us really watched those long trailers. We didn't watch like clips and, you know, what's released during the campaign. Obviously, we saw a lot of the marketing, which was great. I think that's probably going to be the most well known that comes out, like how they marketed the movie.
Movies.
The
Because they
movies.
combined them at a point.
They did. They
really
acknowledged
the Barbenheimer.
They dive deep into that.
Yeah.
And it's just really fun. But eventually we'll transition to Oppenheimer. But like the fact is that these two big movies came out on the same day, and they're such opposites. Like they're such opposites. So when we get to Oppenheimer, we'll talk more about that. But Barbie was definitely a hit.
Yes.
It's something that everyone can watch.
I think so. I think I've had a couple people ask me, like, is this something that you could take your kids to?
Yeah.
It depends the age range. I definitely feel like the message and a lot of the writing and comedy, it does lend itself to being for those, like, 13 and up. Like, I feel like if there are kids coming in here to kind of
watch something,
relate to a previous movie that has existed, like Life Size. I don't know if you ever remember watching that movie of the doll that comes to life and like Lindsay Lohan and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That seems more for like kids, while this one is more of a mature take on that, but still has a lot of comedic elements. It's directed really well. The writing is spectacular.
It's also fast. Like,
it's very fast paced.
It doesn't necessarily feel fast, but it's not telling you things you don't need to know. Like, it's very straight to the point, and that will help keep kids' attention. And Barbie Land will help keep their attention as well. But like you're saying, the reality is that the teenager isn't the one playing with Barbie, and not the character that Barbie has to go and meet. It's actually her mom.
Yeah.
And so in the end, I think you're right. Like, adults, specifically women, obviously, are going to love this movie. Teenagers, preteens, but I wouldn't say toddlers and younger would really last. I mean, you could take them.
Yeah, you could definitely take them.
So it was a great all-around experience.
I had a fantastic time. Like you were saying, like I would rewatch this movie just to see like Ken. I think he really I don't want to say outshine Margot, because Barbie had fantastic scenes and a lot of great moments where you just really felt the monologue in her brain, like having those conversations of like questioning where she is and why she really exists, why. So it has those moments, but it was just something about Ryan Gosling's performance that really just stood out, and he just was having a blast on there. So
And I think his own character development was nice to watch, because I mean, not to get too into it, but you go from a side character, I guess, like Ken has always been a side thought.
Even he says, like, my days are made when she is actually looking at me.
Yeah, I don't exist without you. And so to know where he started and know where Karen characters ended, I loved it, to be honest, because like it goes to show that everyone and anyone should learn who they are as individuals. And maybe you're meant to be with someone, you know, maybe you're meant to have a partner, but the reality is that you should always know who you are first.
Yes.
So it was great messages overall, very empowering for women. Of course, there's a lot of clapping from the audience.
Yeah.
And it was super fun all around. So what are you gonna rate it? Like, kind of, there's a little bit of time, we had to sit a little bit, and I still am rating it pretty high. What's your rating?
I think I've stayed within that 8.5 realm where I was when I walked out of the theater. Like, I really was having a good time. The audience left happy.
Yep.
Like, everyone just felt like this extra sense of just uplifting, which, knowing the topics of the movies, I knew the next one that I was going to watch wasn't going to have that same feeling. So it really made me, like, want to keep and come back and watch it. So I feel like the 8.5 is perfect.
Like, that's where I'm at too. That's absolutely a really good rating, and I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and I guess just to put a little bit of, like, to identify some of the bad things here, bad with
Quote,
quotation.
unquote,
It's just that the real world characters, I feel like, didn't really add too much, except America Ferrera's character. She was fantastic, and her monologue really hit home and had the audience clapping, I think.
Absolutely.
So that,
but it definitely gets you Will Ferrell's
character and the whole boardroom thing. Like, it was a fun little visual joke, and like I felt like it overstayed its welcome towards the end of the movie. So I think that would be one thing that really pushes it down.
It definitely was just a plot device.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's, again, like one of those funny, like, random things that kids might like. But you're right, I am right there with you. Like, there was a point, especially, I mean, we won't get into the storyline, but there was a point towards the end where it's like, why are you even here? Why are you still here, bro? Like, it's done.
Yeah, so Barbie, 8.5 out of 10.
8.5 out of 10, absolutely, yeah. As I said, these movies are complete opposites, but both very well deserve to be released, and I'm so glad that they did this, right? Releasing these two movies on the same day. So, our next movie, part of Barbenheimer, is Oppenheimer, directed by Christopher Nolan. Huge director. Again, probably the only director who could have done this film because of the story, because how he put it together. And the type of editing style for us as an audience to stay focused, to stay invested, and to continue to understand it, you know?
Yes.
So overall, Oppenheimer is about the American scientist J. Robert Oppenheimer and his role in the development of the atomic bomb. But I will say that it goes a little beyond just the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
Like, some people might think it's about that, but it's not. It's about Oppenheimer and who he is as a scientist, as a politician, and I think even as a man, like as a partner. And it shows the progression of pre-bomb to post-bomb, where he was at before they approached him to make this, and after they left him like, they left him stranded in a sense, once he finished the job.
Once they did what they needed him to do, they discarded him in a sense, right?
Yeah. So it was a really good story, and I think a story worth telling, because not many people know about him. They know maybe his name, but always attached to the atomic bomb. But I don't think many people know about him. So I felt like this was a really good story to tell.
Yeah, and a very timely message that Christopher Nolan is trying to send with this movie, right? Like, there's always been, ever since World War II, that fear of nuclear warfare. So it's really something that he wanted to show, and didn't want to put so much stock into just to the atomic bomb. And like you were saying, this movie isn't about the bomb, it's about Oppenheimer. And his beliefs and how things have changed in his mind because of the bomb and pre-bomb, like you were saying. But I think cast just carried this movie incredibly. Cillian Murphy as J. Robert Oppenheimer, fantastic casting. Besides the fact that they look eerily similar to each other in real life, he just absolutely took on this role. Like, I didn't see Cillian Murphy anymore. I just saw Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
And it was very similar for me with Robert Downey Jr. I think he did such a fantastic job that there's a portion of this movie, a good chunk, where you're just dedicated to listening to long dialogues between characters, and he's in that forefront, but he's just doing such a heck of a job that you just can't help but to be so invested in what's going on into the screen.
Yeah.
And there was a scene stealing performance to me, or moment for me, from Emily Blunt.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I think that really just, it's so interesting too, because we had mentioned after we had watched the movie that they casted a lot of great actors.
There's so many big names.
Yeah.
There's so many big names, but none of them are this, like, they're not necessarily supporting characters.
No.
They're just kind of like in the
Scattered
background.
in the background. Yeah. And it's interesting because it's like, man, Nolan has such a name to him that he can get actors like that.
Right.
But it's also because they're portraying very important people in historical stances, but because this isn't about them. This is about Oppenheimer, but it's still showing that Oppenheimer stood out among all of these types of famous people. All of these
exceptional politicians, scientists, researchers, professors. Like, Einstein was in this movie for a good amount, and still, like, it goes to show again, right, that Oppenheimer was beyond any of these people and impacted the world, like, so much so that they were all, like, gravitating towards him and, you know, wanted to be in his orbit and wanted to be in his influence, you know?
Yeah.
So it is crazy just how wide the cast is. And yeah, you mentioned Emily Blunt. I loved her performance. I loved her character because, like I said to you, behind every great man, like, especially back then, there was always great women. And this movie really showcased how, if it wasn't for her, honestly, like, Oppenheimer probably would have crumbled at some point, you know? She was his rock. She was his knight, like, fighting for him and pushing him to do things beyond his imagination. She knew that this was his moment and, like, never faltered from supporting him. So I loved, like, learning about her, and I loved how Emily Blunt performed and portrayed her character. It was amazing. It really was.
And like many Nolan movies that we've seen within the his recent releases with Tenet, Dunkirk, a little bit here with The Dark Knight, there is a lot of like changing or weird styles of editing, which you kind of foreshadowed when you first introduced the movie. But he does such a fantastic job of keeping you so invested, and I feel like he knows now that he has to captivate the audience to be able to follow the way he's trying to tell this story.
Right.
And I think this is the best version that he's had so far. And it's broken up to me in themes, and each time it has a flash forward or a flashback, it's still within themes, so the audience was really able to follow along and comprehend it and really know where each character stood in general, not only, and like you could also see their perspectives changing through those flashbacks and flash forwards, so it was really interesting and done really well.
Yeah, and how those flashbacks came at, like you're saying, the perfect moments, like the right moments for us to further understand what's going on in Oppenheimer's mind. Like, you go back to, yes, we have different perspectives, but throughout it all, it's about what Oppenheimer is thinking, what is influencing him and his decisions and his morals, and like the type of people, again, that he has around him really impacted the future state.
Yeah.
And that's what these kind of flashbacks and different perspective try to give us context in, that everything he had done before in the past will soon come and basically bite him in the ass later. So it was done so well. I really liked, too, that you could tell, like, sometimes it get confusing, but if you would pay attention to the state of the body, for example, you could see the age in Oppenheimer, right? And that told me, okay, we're in the future. And then sometimes they change the coloring of the past or the future. Like,
it was either black and white or if it was in color.
Yeah.
I think the times where it was black and white, those were the few moments in the movie where it wasn't from Oppenheimer's perspective, because we were following Robert Downey Jr.'s character. I think it's Louis Strauss.
Yes.
And although didn't come into play in Oppenheimer's life until later after the atomic bomb, it had such a huge impact in Oppenheimer's ability to continue his political, influence
Career.
that he had.
Okay.
So we follow Robert Downey Jr.'s character, who is trying to just muddy and tarnish his reputation so he can have that power, right? So it is really interesting in how Nolan uses his editing style, different ways of filming, either having much more close-ups, different colors, of having either color or black and white. It's just so crazy, the different types of ways of making a movie that are introduced in just this one film. It's just crazy.
And it goes back again to the weekends. The difference in how filmmaking can impact a story, and what someone's individual creativity and innovation can change the way you're watching a movie. And I have to mention some of the visuals we see in Oppenheimer too. It's not always just people. It's also sparks, it's fire, it's burnt ash and
stars burning out, stars imploding.
Again, to add kind of the macro impact of what's going on in this story. So I really liked the visuals he added. The score was great. It literally shook the theater.
Rattled the theater.
Yeah, it shook you. And the sounds they used to kind of show some of his anxiety. We pointed out that when there's cheering, there's also screams, there's also crying, because again, there's so much perspectives going on when the bomb was dropped. There's opposites, there's in the middle ground, people are have different feelings about it, and in just the sound effects in one moment, I'll always remember that scene of him giving his speech, and he's listening to the cheers, and then it goes silent, and then it goes loud again, and we're hearing screams, and it's silent again, and then we're hearing crying. So it's amazing, not just visually and editing, but in sound as well. The score is great. It's such a great film.
Yeah.
No one else could have done this type of film.
Yeah, no one else could have made Oppenheimer like Christopher Nolan did, to have an audience be invested and sit through a 3-hour in a sense biopic, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which I didn't feel.
Yeah.
I left the theater and I was like, holy shit, that was 3 hours? I didn't feel it, which is awesome because we have felt it before.
Oh, we felt it before for sure. And I do think as much as we want to praise Oppenheimer, I think the first 2 hours of this movie are some of the best, if not the best, that Christopher Nolan has done. But that last hour is just so, I feel will be very divisive because it's so heavy in dialogue, so heavy in legal proceedings, so heavy in just...
in background and manipulations and arguments. Yeah, it's very dialogue heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing is, but in that case, that last hour, there's very little action, movement even. A lot of it is in still rooms. It's crazy, but those conversations are really important.
They were really important. And again, I'm just thinking of the general consumer, that hour maybe could have been cut down to 30 minutes and it would have still had that same impact.
Yeah.
But I was telling Tina, at a point I just sat back and just was enjoying Robert Downey Jr.'s performance. To me, it's crazy that the two biggest standouts are the supporting actors to me this weekend, with Ryan Gosling and Robert Downey Jr. I think it's going to be crazy in the Oscars where it's going to come down to a Ken and to Robert Downey Jr. So
let's really quick talk about the audience, because we kind of mentioned that in Barbie, that movie is a very anyone and everyone. But this movie is different. We have to acknowledge that. This movie is not for everyone, because you do have to like these type of films. You do have to like these dialogue-driven films, these, like you're saying, biopics in a way. And you have to be, I think, a movie goer, a fan of filmmaking, right? A fan of the technical
aspects of filmmaking.
And the skills that go behind it. If you're a really big film goer and you love to watch movies all the time, like if you're going out to the theaters or not, this movie is for you because you're going to appreciate all of that and you will be willing to sit through it. But if you're, if you're just an average person, this movie...
If you're just an average moviegoer.
If you're just an average moviegoer, yeah, you probably won't go to the theaters to watch this, which is okay because it's still going to make great money.
They made a buttloads of money
it's still gonna make a lot. Yeah, it's still gonna make a lot of money. But I would still say that you should watch it either at home streaming with some friends, or just with a glass of wine one night, willing to spend 3 hours to watch this film because it's just done so well.
It is done really well. It's a masterful piece of art. The first 2 hours are phenomenal. The last hour definitely drags a little bit, but I do agree. I think everyone should make some time to watch this movie, but do be warned, it does take a lot of focus. It does require a lot of, just being captivated and enthralled in that world at that moment in time, that even after I left the movie theater, I was exhausted. Like, I was tired, ready for a nap.
When I left the theater, I didn't feel, like, as odd, as, like, moved, But I think it's because you do need to sit and kind of appreciate what you watched. And you do need to sit and kind of think back on the technicality of it all.
Yeah.
And again, because it's dialogue heavy, sometimes you just have to recap everything that was said and the story itself, So because of that, I don't, like, I hesitated in my rating. I will say that. I know that it's high, but I just don't know if it's that high. So I'll start with you, darling. What would you rate Oppenheimer?
Oh, on a personal note, I would rate Oppenheimer at about a 9 out of 10. I think, we've been saying this entire time, I just think it's one of Nolan's best movies that he's made in his phenomenal filmography. The first 2 hours are top tier, just movie-going experience that I've had. So for me, it's a pretty solid 9 out of 10.
That's great. For me, like, I'm at an 8.5. Only because of that, because I know that I won't be able to rewatch this necessarily and, like, really enjoy it over again. Like, it's obviously a great film, but it doesn't leave me wanting to go back and watch it again because it's so long. And I know it's going to make a big impact in the Oscars, in the Grammy, or whatever, in the
Golden Globes.
Golden Globes, yeah, thank you. But I guess I would consider myself a more average, moviegoer. And so I'm at an 8.5.
Okay. No, that's still really solid. And for a 3-hour biopic about...
For a Barbenheimer weekend, like, both of the movies did fantastic. And I love that we had this type of experience this summer. Because we've only had it maybe once before where 2 huge movies came out like this. And neither of them flopped, right? Neither of them they won't see them not getting a return in their investments, right? They're definitely going to make their budgets.
Yeah.
And they'll see a really big crowd. I think Oppenheimer will take a little more time. People won't, maybe not seeing it this weekend, but next.
That word of mouth will definitely.
Yes, exactly. But I love that we had these 2 great movies on the opposite spectrums do what they did amazingly, in their own ways, in their own innovative ways. And I love Barbenheimer. I love the marketing that we were talking about earlier and how they blended it together at some point. And what a great weekend for movies.
Yeah, definitely a great weekend for movies. I'm enamored, like you said. They're on 2 ends of the spectrum. They were able to deliver fantastic messages and for each one of those movies. And I'm leaving this weekend just overjoyed. I think this is great for the movie industry. Like we were talking about in the car, we still say, pay your fucking writers, because you're seeing firsthand right here when 2 well-written movies are made.
Yes.
Audiences will go and watch them.
Absolutely. Give you all their money. But it's not just about the writers. It's also about the CGI artists, the composers, the choreographers, the
set
effects.
Dressers.
It's the entire production that needs to also invest their time, their values into something that they feel passionate about. And that's what we see, these results.
Yeah.
When the entire team is behind something so passionately, it jumps at you from the screen. But when you get shitty stories, it's because you're probably not paying them well enough. It's probably not that good of a story or that kind of idea, or it's rushed. Exactly. So we have to acknowledge that, right? Like, definitely pay the screenwriters and everyone who's behind these type of films and beyond, because if not, the quality of work that comes to the big screen, for one thing, is gonna plummet hugely.
Yeah.
And that's when you're going to see immense impacts to not just the film industry, but the community, the people who work in the industry, and beyond. Like you'll see theater companies also be impacted by that too. So studios have to acknowledge when a story is worth investing in and when the people are worth investing into. If they're going to just be, distributing crap just to make a buck every year, you're gonna see that people don't like that. Like,
people catch on
when it's just AI generated stories,
Yeah.
So on a realistic note, like, we have to support that community, and we definitely stand with them too, because we're such huge fans of movies and TV, and we want to see quality work. We want to see quality projects, and let's hope that things turn out well in that industry and for the writers.
Yeah.
And the actors and everyone.
Yeah, most definitely. And thanks so much for going out with me this Barbenheimer weekend, darling. It's one for the history books.
Absolutely, yeah.
Fantastic.
If you watched Barbie or Oppenheimer this weekend, definitely drop a comment down below. What did you think about them? Because we're so interested to hear from you. We'd love to talk about these two movies more. And if you like this type of video, definitely give us a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. It just makes our day, and it really keeps us motivated to keep making these type of videos. Next week, we're going to watch Haunted Mansion. So if you want to hear a review about that, hit the like button, drop a comment down below, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for talking movies with us.
Bye.
Bye.